Good afternoon in the name of LATCAM to our viewers in Switzerland, and good morning to all those who are joining us today from across Latin America. In 2021, we proposed for the first time a successful webinar featuring a distinguished panel from the International Finance Corporation. 3 years later, it is a great pleasure for us to re-edit this experience with a new high-level panel whose chosen topic is opportunities and challenges in climate and energy in Latin America and the Caribbean, how IFC fosters private sector engagement. I'm delighted to introduce to you our speakers from IFC. Marcela Ponce, Head of Sustainable Financial Advisory Services. Miguel Toledo, Chief Investment Officer. Juan Gonzalo Flores, Country Manager for Mexico. Jan van Bilsen, Country Manager for Switzerland, Germany, Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden. A warm welcome to all of you. I also welcome our speaker from Switzerland Global Enterprise, Christian Michel, Manager for International Financial Institutions. Welcome to the panel, Christian. Our moderator is someone whom we appreciate for his abundant knowledge and expertise in a wide variety of relevant fields and who is also well known to most of our viewers. Dr. Philippe Nel, Honorary Ambassador of LATCAM. Great to have you with us, Philippe. This session would not be complete without the introductory remarks by someone who has worked extensively with IFC in the past. Ramon Esteve, President of LATCAM. Welcome, Ramon. Before I give you the virtual floor, a quick word for our audience. In this 75-minute webinar, we will make time for Q&A after all the presentations have been held. However, feel free to send us your questions in writing at any time. Now it's my pleasure to hand over to our President, Ramon Esteve, for his remarks. Please go ahead, Ramon.
Thank you, Tatiana, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ramon Esteve, and I am a customer of IFC. That is not some kind of weird addiction. It has been a partnership of close to 20 years between IFC and ECOM, a company involved in the trading of agricultural commodities. How did this start? Well, in 2007, we joined a public-private partnership involving Nespresso, the Rainforest Alliance, and IFC in the coffee-producing regions of Mexico, Costa Rica, and Guatemala to implement the Nespresso AAA program, the gold standard in the sourcing of sustainable coffees. Initially, we were a bit skeptical as to the role of IFC, as we felt we could fund the program ourselves. But as it turns out, IFC provides much more than just financing. Their technical assistance teams were essential to help us train farmers in best agricultural practices, including gender inclusion initiatives to improve water management and facilitating credit to farmers for farm improvements. These programs greatly improved farmer livelihood with better yields and premium prices. IFC funds projects that traditional banks will not do and in geographies where it is not particularly attractive to them. Our relationship with IFC and other DFIs has evolved over time. They have been providing us with the longer-term credit to our processing infrastructure in the tropical belt. IFC sees trading companies as one of the best vectors for economic development. I wanted to give this short introductory testimonial as IFC has the resources that I think few Swiss companies avail themselves of, yet Switzerland participates in the funding of IFC. Some may say that their support comes with strings attached in terms of KPIs and monitoring. I do not deny that, but implementing IFC performance standards has helped us have a huge head start when it comes to the Swiss responsible business legislation, which was passed 4 years ago, and now with the European Union Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. So those things are very much covered by the performance standards that we've been applying for close to 20 years. With that, I would really encourage anyone to check out IFC for your projects in Latin America. And Philippe, I pass the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Roman. Thank you also very much for sharing with us your experience on IFC. I think it's very important to start this webinar with a practical experience of a company who has been working closely with IFC and therefore has shown in the field IFC's contribution to its own business, and in particular, not only in financing but also in contributing to the living standards of thousands of farmers working on various crops across Latin America. So I'd like to welcome very much all the panelists and also the audience, and I'm sure we are going to have a very, very interesting session this afternoon. I'm very pleased to moderate the webinar today with top executives of IFC. Our objective is to get IFC closer to the Swiss business community by showing what IFC does and how could Swiss firms join IFC activities. We will first look at IFC from the perspective of Switzerland Global Enterprise with Christian Michel. And second, we'll have an overview of IFC with Jan van Bilsen. Third, an overview from Mexico with Juan Gonzalo Flores. And then fourth, we will look at the energy sector with Miguel Toledo. And finally, at climate with Marcela Ponce. Q&A sessions will conclude the webinar. If we get questions from you when one of the speakers is speaking, we may just answer the questions right after he has finished his session. Each of them will speak for about 10 minutes. So without having you to wait any longer, I have the pleasure now to give the floor to Christian Michel from Switzerland Global Enterprise. Christian, you have the floor.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Philippe, and to LATCAM for the invitation. I think Tatiana will share my slides. So I am Christian Michel, Manager for International Finance Institutions, and I represent Switzerland Global Enterprise, the Swiss Economic Promotion Agency. And I would like to talk to you about our collaboration with the international finance institutions, including the IFC, and about this infrastructure mandate that aims to provide access to Swiss companies to large infrastructure projects abroad. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So SGE usually does the export promotion for Swiss companies and the investment promotion. And since 2022, we received a mandate from the Swiss State Secretariat of Economic Affairs to provide this access to large international infrastructure projects for Swiss companies. We do this through our network of offices that are within the Swiss embassies and consulates around the world. Next slide, please. This is a Team Switzerland approach. So we work not only as SGE, but with the three main Swiss business associations, Swiss MEM for technology, Swiss Rail for the railway and mobility industries, and Swiss Inch for engineering consulting firms. We also provide financing and insurance to that financing through the Swiss Export Credit Agency, SERF. And of course, we collaborate not only with SECO, the Swiss Economic Secretariat for Economic Affairs, but also with other Swiss government institutions like Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Environment and Transportation, etc. Next slide, please. We have identified which are the main sectors where Swiss companies are competitive, both to provide services, act as suppliers, and also as investors in infrastructure projects abroad. And this is mostly transport, with a strong focus on railway and urban public transport. Of course, Swiss, with our topography, we also have an expertise on building tunnels and bridges. Also energy, renewables, energy efficiency, hydroelectric power plants as well, and water and sanitation. Water being one of the main resources that we have, natural resources that we have in Switzerland. Next slide, please. So we have started this project 2 years ago, and we have identified some focus countries or regions to identify these projects. And we have infrastructure experts within the embassies, within the consulates in these regions, and of course, Latin America is a very important region for us. We have an infrastructure expert based in Sao Paulo, but he's in charge of the whole region. He has been mostly exploring the Brazilian market, and this year also countries like Mexico and Chile. Of course, mobility is a big issue, water, access to water, and of course, renewable energies in Latin America as well. So for each country, we have been identifying which are the main subsectors where Swiss companies may have an interest. Next one, please. So my responsibility is to connect Swiss companies with international finance institutions, and we do this with the World Bank Group, including the IFC, but also with other regional development banks for the region, of course, the Inter-American Development Bank, the IDB, and also with their private sector arm, IDB Invest, is of relevance. And we aim to provide information for Swiss companies on how to work with these institutions, how the procurement processes work, where they can find the tenders, experience sharing from other Swiss companies that have been successfully working with institutions like the IFC, for example. We also try to position Swiss expertise, solutions, technology, engineering in the development of these projects. And we identify, of course, the different projects participating in business missions. We take Swiss companies to the region. We had a big delegation to Brazil last year. We're planning some other ones to Mexico and Chile this or next year. And we also receive delegations from different, for example, utility companies, private sector agencies as well, to Switzerland to show them about Swiss infrastructure. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of the activities we have undertaken with the IFC. So I say hi to my colleague Jan here, who has participated in our events as panel speakers in Zurich many times. Also in Brazil, the IFC country representative participated during last year's visit of our federal councillor Guy Parmelin. And we also recently visited this year with a group of 10 Swiss companies in the water sector, the headquarters of the World Bank and the IFC in Washington, DC. And these kinds of events are really made to explain how Swiss companies can work with IFIs, but also to position our different key sectors and solutions. Next slide, please. So I have here some project examples of Swiss engineering companies that have worked in IFC finance projects, some directly as IFC consultants. This has been done through corporate procurement, of course, with open bidding. So these companies, for example, Swiss engineering company Lombardi, worked in the Peru drinking water supply project for Lima. They did all of the design engineering, and of course their expertise here in the Swiss mountains and with water management has been why they were selected for the design of this project. Other examples are AFRI, that has worked with IFC in energy plant in Central Asia. But really, we are focusing on Swiss investment in Latin America in these projects, but also to position the engineering and Swiss supply can give you access to financing. So if we go to the next slide, many of the projects, this is mostly to showcase what added value, or in which kinds of subsectors and projects Swiss engineering firms have been working with international finance institutions abroad. So this goes from project planning, feasibility studies, design, as I mentioned, supervision and rehabilitation of works. And we have expertise, as I said, in environmental planning, in tunneling, in transportation, mobility, spatial development, water and sanitation as well. So coming to the financing, if we go to the next slide, my colleague from the Swiss Export Credit Agency couldn't be here today, but he asked me to showcase that many of the projects are co-financed, right? And we each time we're talking more about blended finance. So our Swiss Export Credit Agency has also some experience in working together with the IFC in some projects. There was another project in Brazil, also in the energy sector, that was financed through IFC, through SURF, and other partners. So here, SURF also provides some financing that can be complementary to IFC, and of course, in their whole ESG standards, SURF uses the IFC environmental and social standards. So it can be also a very good complement to investments through IFC in Latin America. You can find his email address here below. I think if we go to the next slide and final slide, you have my contact information here as well. And thank you again to LATCAM for letting us present the Swiss infrastructure mandate and our collaboration with IFC.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Michel, for really connecting. You have connected us now with IFC, with Swiss engineering and Swiss economy. I should just point to the fact that in Switzerland, manufacturing still has about 25% of GDP, while it's 10% in France and about 12% in the US. So Switzerland remains a powerhouse in manufacturing. And based on that, based on innovation, based on technology, indeed, Switzerland is, through its companies and through its know-how, a country which companies are active and very interested to further continue to contribute to infrastructure and railroad construction, engineering, and so on, throughout the world, and in particular in Latin America, procurement or investment. This being said, I'd like to give the floor now to Jan van Bilzen, who is going to make for us an overview of IFC. So Jan, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, good morning indeed to everybody. Indeed, very, very pleased to be here. Big thanks to LATCAM and Tatjana for organizing this together with the others, and also pleased indeed to see you, Philip, as a moderator, and Christian, basically as our partner on the infrastructure side in Switzerland, and also our colleagues who are there, so they were introduced already earlier. And then, of course, also very much indeed Ramon, who was very pleased, very, very, very kind, I should say, to give an introduction and his experiences working with IFC. And indeed, as Ramon said, working with IFC is more than just only the financing. So I have like a 10-slide presentation, and Tatjana, if you don't mind to put it up, I'll quickly go through that to basically explain you who we are, what we do. It's more like basically a general presentation. So indeed, I'm based in Frankfurt, and I cover Switzerland and a few other countries. So on the next slide, you will see basically who we are as IFC. This shows that as IFC, we are the private sector arm of the World Bank Group. These 5 institutions you see there together are the group. The two institutions at the left-hand side together are called the World Bank, and they are the public sector arm of the group. So IFC is the private sector arm. We are about half the size of the World Bank. The private sector grows much faster than the public sector because many more countries in emerging markets realize that the private sector is the engine of growth. There's also this institution called MIGA, which you see there, which is, as is mentioned, the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, providing guarantees and political risk insurance. And then the other institution there is more for settlement of investment disputes. You don't see too much of that. What is important to note is that our mandate is to work towards reduction of poverty, to end poverty. And we do that on a livable planet. So the mandate has been expanded recently, and a livable planet means global public goods, including climate and health, and basically the rest of it. So the next slide gives a few basically highlights of who we are as IFC, and some data. We are present basically across the globe, how old we are, etc. So the institution indeed was set up 10 years after the World Bank was set up, with a specific mandate to work with the private sector. So we do need companies like yourselves, everybody who has signed in and attended this workshop. Thank you very much for that. Because basically we are not the ones who are going to invest ourselves, or are the promoter or the sponsor, the initiator of projects in emerging markets. That is not our role. Our role is to support and to work with the private sector in emerging markets and into emerging markets. So very much also Swiss companies, of course. And then help them with indeed financing, and more than financing, as Ramon said right in the beginning. So basically the next slide then shows you the product range. Its simplest is to remember that everything on the liability side of the balance sheet, that's what we do, including equity, senior debt, sub-debt, mezzanine, etc. We also have derivatives of balance sheet products as well, including guarantees for trade finance. We do not compete with commercial banks. We step in when commercial banks are not willing to take the risk. So we help them. So they take risk on us and we take risk on others. And what is also mentioned here is that we syndicate. So we mobilize funds. So it's not only our own account that we put basically at work, but also funds of other parties. It's capital mobilization, as we call it, private capital mobilization. Blended finance is a concessional financing. We don't provide concessional financing ourselves. We work on commercial terms, but we work together with governments and with donors who do provide concessional financing, and we blend that with our own financing. So hence the word blended finance. But only in cases where it is really needed to make projects bankable and to do that on a temporary basis. So the next slide shows you basically where we are present, as I said, sort of across the world. And then the slide after this shows basically the impact. Remember, we are a development finance institution, so development comes before the finance. The reason why we do all of this is, as I showed earlier, to work towards reducing poverty in the world. That is really the mandate that we have, and hence that we measure our impact by means of some numbers that you see here. So numbers of farmers used, or patients used, or scholars at schools, or jobs created, or tax income generated by our clients for the benefit of that country, etc., etc. Okay, good. So what do we do with Switzerland? And that is then the next slide that shows basically. Oh, sorry, this is the slide that shows where we invest. Indeed, as was mentioned by Philip, that the manufacturing sector is very important in Switzerland. As IFC, and indeed the work with SGE, as Jan explained, focus on infrastructure. That's the mandate that SGE has received from the government of Switzerland. We are quite large in infrastructure, but basically this slide gives you an overview that we are active across the globe. And also in all kinds of sectors. So what we do with Switzerland, and that is the next slide, is We work very actively with SECO. SECO is part of the, let's say, Ministry of Economy, and it has been the second largest donor to IFC over time. So the Swiss are very, very active indeed, and they use IFC as one of the implementation partners to say, well, you know, for the overseas development policy and strategy. And so the number of projects that we work with them on at any point in time. What you see on the slide as well, we are quite active with the sector, with the corporate sector in Switzerland. So since 2005, we have financed 2.3 billion to Swiss companies. That's only the portion of the Swiss shareholding in a total project. So on a pro rata basis, and this is to 92 different companies over time. But most of them indeed are in the financial sector, trading, and in infrastructure. The current portfolios are close to $1 billion indeed at the moment. And indeed, we reach out through events like this and other indeed events or one-on-one meetings. So after this webinar, please feel free to contact us and so we can discuss how we can help you. So the next slide quickly shows you what the added value is. I won't go into this in detail, but there were 3 points to remember. Number one is working with IFC means that you benefit from the knowledge that we have gained over the decades. Also the knowledge of the World Bank group. So that means our sister organization, the World Bank, the public sector arm. The knowledge we have on sectors, on how to do business, knowledge on the ground through the 100 offices, etc. Number two, risk mitigation. If you work with us, the political risk and other risks are lower. Why? Because number one, because of the knowledge that helps to reduce risk, but also because of our contacts with governments. We have 187 member countries, so sort of the whole world. So if things go wrong, we can knock on the door. It's not a guarantee that things will not go wrong. It's not a guarantee that things will get back on track, but experience over the years in our portfolio shows that clearly there is risk mitigation working with us. And the third point is indeed the financing. So we do provide financing and indeed where commercial banks are not willing to go, longer tenors in 70 different currencies. So with that you immediately mitigate your currency risk. For instance, and it indeed very, very long maturities. So, and this slide you will later get a copy of course. So, who do we work with is the next slide. And this is basically companies who invest, what I said earlier. So if you are a company who say, well, you know, you have a project in country X, or you become a shareholder in that project, and you're looking for financing, then what I just explained with the benefits that we bring to the table. And so we would like to talk with you about that. It could well be that many companies, of course, in Switzerland, as Christian also explained, are contractors or consultants. Extremely important, because without them, the project will not take place. But for us, we do have an indirect relationship with them. So we do, as such, not basically finance the contractor or the consultant, we finance the project. Or you finance the company behind it, right? But it is important for you to know what we do in your discussion with your principal and to introduce them to us. And we provide procurement projects, not only IFC, particularly the World Bank, where you can become a consultant to a World Bank project, to an IFC project. And thirdly, exporters. So many of you, of course, are exporters, and we provide trade finance products with important for you to know also for your exports. Say you export from Switzerland to country X, your bank is unwilling to take the risk on the opening bank for a letter of credit in country Y, then think of us, because we have a relationship with a few hundred banks in emerging markets and can take such risk. So the last slide that I have is basically then on the procurement. As I mentioned, this gives you a website. Again, this are procurement contracts either by the World Bank or by IFC ourselves, or by our clients if we have provided them financing. And there is a certain process for that. You find it all here. It is on an open tender basis. Everything is transparent. It is competitive. But of course, at any point in time, there were hundreds of projects basically going on. So that may be of interest to you as well. So with that, this is basically a quick introduction of who we are as IFC and who we could be of support to you. And as I said earlier, don't hesitate to reach out to us here in Frankfurt or to any of my colleagues. We're happy indeed to discuss how we can assist you. Thank you. Back to you, Philippe.
Okay, thank you very much, Jan, for a comprehensive presentation of IFC. You have provided us with very useful data points, which are impressive in terms of number of loans provided by IFC for micro and small companies, in terms of new internet connections, in terms of also corporate clients, and a very significant business with Swiss companies, a pipeline of about $1 billion right now. What I also like to emphasize is that you said that your mandate is development before finance and also reduction of poverty in the world. And indeed, this is extremely important, particularly looking at Latin America. I just come back from a visit to Peru for 8 days, and the potential is everywhere, you know. There is a need of capital, and it is what IFC is just doing. So I think this is the right way, and Swiss companies can take part into that. This being said, let me turn now to Juan Gonzalo Flores, who will talk about global challenges and transformative solutions with a focus on Latin America and the Caribbean. Juan, you have the floor.
Thanks, Philippe. And first of all, it's great to hear an appreciative client like Ramon Esteve. I had the pleasure to lead that famous Econ Coffee project while I was based in Nicaragua. So great to hear that after all these years, you are still remember that project and you are very appreciative. Okay, by now you have heard that IFC is a global institution. In order to do our activities, we divide the world in 7 regions: Africa, East Asia and the Pacific, South Asia, Europe, Middle East, Central Asia and Turkey, and obviously Latin America. Latin America is a very important region for IFC since it concentrates normally in a regular year between 25 to 30% of our long-term commitments. So this is very important. Can I ask Tatiana to put my presentation so I can go with the very first slide? Normal IFC's fiscal year starts on July 1st and ends on June 30. Next one, please. The slide that you are looking at it shows a picture as of December 31st of 2023. This is halfway of our fiscal year 24. If you look at the, so far we've done, we have approved financing for $6.6 billion. We expect this fiscal year to be closer to 12 billion. As the year closes by June 30, we expect to have approved more than 12 billion in Latin America for the private sector companies. Almost half of these transactions are mobilized. This means that we bring third parties to our financing. When you look at the circle, where you see the breakdown of sectors in which we focus, you'll see that financial markets, this is our financing to banks and financial institutions, is by far the large, is 42%, and this is very important to clarify. We lend money to banks so they can on-lend basically to SMEs or women entrepreneurs, to clients that because our size we cannot normally reach. So banks serve us as an intermediary channel. Then we have infrastructure with the 23% of the whole allocations in fiscal year 24, agribusiness, forestry with 14%, and the rest, as you can see in the circle. At the right-hand side of the slide, you can see the focus on the countries. You will see that Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Chile, and Argentina represent 77% of our portfolio. But that doesn't mean that we don't work heavily in Central America, Caribbean, smaller economies. Okay, and regarding countries, Brazil is our most important country because it's the largest side economy in Latin America. that concentrates so far 35% of our investment. Then comes Colombia with 14%, Mexico 11%, Chile, and this is quite extraordinary because Chile was not in our radar before, but nowadays represents 9% of our total financing in Latin America, and Argentina 8%. Next, please. I'm going to skip this slide since Jan has provided a good explanation about our main products and services. And here, I would like you to focus on this slide because it shows how diversified we are in our financing. I included some of the most emblematic projects in different countries of the world, of Latin America, excuse me. You can see the very first one is an upstream project. It's a project being developed to produce green and blue methanol project in the Mochis in Mexico. This is going to be a 2 billion project. We're working on it, and we expect to close this by fiscal year 25. Then we have this BBA, support to BBA in Colombia, so they could issue blue bonds. Conclina in Ecuador is our financing to the main hospital in Ecuador, and I think this is the third transaction we're doing with Conclina. In Chile, we have financed e-buses, electrical buses. In the Dominican Republic, a financing to the BHD Bank to support women entrepreneurs and women-owned SMEs. Then we had an equity investment in a fund in Central America, Pomona. Then we have advisory and mobilization in the Rio municipality in Brazil. We can also work with subnational governments, municipalities and governors without sovereign risk. That's another key characteristic of IFC. And finally, we have this project in Argentina in the lithium industry in Catamarca, where most of the lithium deposits are located in Argentina. You know, the triangle of the lithium is Bolivia, Chile, Argentina, that concentrates closely to 70% of the whole lithium in the world. Next one, please. I'm going to go very fast through this slide, but it showcases our presence in Mexico. And this happens in most of the countries. You know, we started in 1957, and when we started looking 1962, the 70s, the 80s, we used to work with the most important companies in Mexico, such as FEMSA, Cemex, Bimbo, etc., etc. But as these companies evolve, and as we call it, they graduate, they do no longer need us. And then we move to a different schemes, different topics, or to a different kind of companies. Look at the 2020, 2021, where Neo Pharma, banks are still present, CE, Solent, etc., FIPO. We move to different companies because the other companies, they can issue bonds, or they have easy access to financial institutions. So we switch companies, and we call it graduate companies, and we go to the companies that are about to graduate. But this slide reflects our 60 years of experience, not only in Mexico, but in all the countries in which we operate. Next one, please. Here is a sample of the most important transactions we've done in Mexico. In the financial sector, telecommunication sector, education, we do finance universities. Supply chain finance, this transaction with Citibank is to what is called reverse factoring, is to finance SME through large buyers from which we take the risk. Clínicas del Azúcar is a one-stop shop for diabetes. It's very interesting transaction. And obviously Xcaret in the tourism sector, Vinte, which is a housing developer, etc., etc. I'm not going to go through all of this, just to show you that we work in absolutely all the sectors and with different kinds of stakeholders. Next one. Same thing, Jan has explained. We don't want to be seen as just a provider of money. Along our financing, we also have advisory services. We have upstream activities. Marcela will dig deeply into this, but we also work with companies, big companies, supporting, reducing the gender gap, supporting them in green construction, decarbonization. We have different structures to support the clients. In the 4 areas we consider the key of the backbone of our activities, gender, climate, SMEs, and digitalization. Next one, please. Finally, I want to keep a couple of minutes to explain this because we are seeing a very interesting phenomenon taking place nowadays in LATCAM, especially in Mexico, and this is the nearshoring. I'm sure you have heard about nearshoring. This is companies relocating basically from Asia to Mexico to be closer to the United States or Canada. We've done this analysis, which will be the most important countries in Latin America that will benefit from nearshoring, and obviously Mexico is the most important, but we have done an analysis, we call it a nearshoring analysis, to see where can be the most important benefits in which sectors, and you can see in this graph, starting from automotives, machinery, equipment, electronics, semiconductors, etc., and we have the countries in which we think they are gonna benefit from: Mexico, Colombia, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Guatemala, Mexico, Panama, Peru, El Salvador, etc. I think this is something that's gonna keep us discussing the next 10 years, and I see that it's gonna be huge opportunities for countries, for companies, and willing to relocate to Mexico. Nowadays, the flow of investment happening in Mexico is unbelievable. Only last year, there were $35 billion in foreign direct investment related to nearshoring activities. So bear in mind that this is happening in Mexico. It will happen, and in my view, it will last at least the next 10 years. And this is something not only in Mexico, but in Latin America. And this is something that Swiss companies might take advantage of, also considering relocating or creating new subsidiaries in Latin America. Next one, please. I'm going to skip this one, but this is what guides our activity. In all IFC, we would like to see these 3 topic areas addressed: productivity, inclusion, and sustainability. We are, in fact, very keen on nearshoring because we think it is the right vehicle to deliver our program based on these 3 big areas. Next one. As everybody can see, I have included our contacts here. Please don't hesitate to contact me, to contact any of these colleagues if you have any question about Latin America or any question about Mexico in particular. Great to have had the opportunity to speak to you, and thank you again.
Okay, thank you very much, Ruan, for your presentation. I'm just going to highlight 2 points here. The first point, it is impressive to see that during the first half of 2024, you are mobilizing $3.1 billion and with a commitment of $3.5 billion. So it's a total of $6.6 billion for Latin America, for projects, for infrastructure, and so on. And also interesting to see that Colombia, in all your activities in Latin America, has a larger share than Mexico. You also cover health and education, which are key items in Latin America and in the developing world. The second point I found really interesting is the last point you raised with nearshoring. Mexico takes the lion's share, and Mexico is in the US-Canada free trade agreement, but it is followed by Costa Rica, and Panama is also attractive, and also Guatemala and Peru. So in due time, it is due time for Latin American countries to benefit from their free trade relations. Many countries have free trade agreement with the United States and with Canada, and therefore, based on their geographic localization, to be able to become the location for manufacturing that is being moved closer to the United States. So here there are some really great perspectives for Latin America, and Mexico is really showing the way. Now let me turn to Miguel Toledo, who will speak about the energy sector. Miguel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Philippe, and good day to everyone. I'm going to give a brief overview of our activities in the energy space. If Tatiana can please put the presentation.
I am very sorry, I did not receive the presentation for you, Miguel.
Let me see. Yeah, if I can send it to you, I mean, I sent it yesterday, but I cannot upload it, unfortunately.
I have it myself. Maybe I could try to load it. I have it myself on my computer here.
You have it?
Yeah, I have it.
Okay, Philippe, either you load it or you send it to me and I upload it in a minute.
Okay. Let me try to load it. Maybe it's a quicker way to do it. I do partager l'écran.
Exactly.
And then energy, it's right here. It's right here. Huh? But now maybe we like to put it in a, full page. Slide 3. Let me see if I can move it.
Is this the first slide?
No, that's the third one.
It's the third one, yes.
But let me go back to it.
Well, while the presentation is being put, maybe I can start just telling everyone a brief overview. So our practice in the energy space is evolving. Today's we have financed over $32 billion in projects over the last decade. We are evolving to renewable of energy transition, especially with emphasis in clean generation and renewables. Maybe you can move to the next one, Philippe. Thanks. Yeah. So today our renewable energy portfolio is about 50% of our portfolio, but it's growing significantly. Pretty much most of what we do now in generation globally is renewable energy, and we support other areas, as I'm going to show later, related to supporting the entrance of renewables, such as transmission and distribution. So what our differential factor is, we do have really global reach. We have internal expertise within IFC, which enable us to transfer knowledge from one region to other, to work on promoting new technologies across emerging markets, and to working together with the World Bank, which we're part of, putting together with governments a regulation and processes to attract private sector investment into the energy sectors. Thanks, Philippe. You can move to the next one. One of the big sort of developments in energy finance is being sustainability type instruments. So IFC has been pioneering the entrance in the market of these instruments, first starting with our own balance sheet, where we have been issuing green bonds in more than 20 currencies, from setting standards in green and sustainable type financing and sustainable link loan principles, from mobilizing investors to cleaner energy in different sort of instruments like global green funds and renewable energy funds, and from promoting our own sustainability linked finance, green finance, blue finance, and social type of financings, which are now probably 50% of what we do across across the energy sectors. So in this slide, you'll see basically our strategy in the sector. It's all about decarbonization and energy transition. So it's mainly financing through debt and equity instruments, as we saw before, of wind, solar generation. We're getting into new technologies that are just being entering emerging markets, such as battery storage and the combination of battery storage and renewables to provide baseload generation. Green hydrogen, which is a very important strategic initiative for us. It's still early stages in the development, but we are trying to play a key role in the development of this industry. And I'll show later one of the tools that we have to develop projects early on in the energy space. Distributed generation, which again, through a small scale residential or commercial and industrial generation, either within a rooftop solar or within the metered type generation, microgrids, etc. We continue to promote the development of this type of small scale generation. And finally, as I said, transmission and distribution, which is the backbone of the systems and are critical to the introduction of renewables. The next one, please, Philip. We have developed a platform called the Future Grids Alliance. It's basically a platform of that supports our investment efforts with technical assistance, advisory, and co-development solutions for investments. And we do that through a team that we have internally. It's our pre-investment team, but also through a number of consultants that work together with us to provide value added to clients. And in this slide, you can see some of the areas where we are adding value to these instruments to clients, and this is specifically used for transmission and distribution companies. So we're talking about green enhancement and digitalization, smart metering, losses reduction programs, improvements in efficiency, cybersecurity, strategies for decarbonization, to put together also strategies for bringing sustainable finance together with debt instruments, advisory on ESG matters, not only including our environmental and social aspects, but also on gender advisory, on community engagement, and finally, risk and regulation, how to work with clients and governments to promote private sector investment, to include new reforms that are conducive to more investment or to new technologies like, again, battery storage and green hydrogen. The next one, please. In Latin America, Felipe, you can move to the next one, please. We're working with across all the region. It's our sectors of our countries of influence, as the previous one, please, as are similar to what Juan Gonzalo described for Latin America overall. Brazil, Colombia, Chile continue to be our top exposures in the region, but we continue to be active across all the region, realizing that the interventions that we need to do in every country are pretty different. The needs for a developed country like Chile, who has experienced a massive introduction of renewables, and now the problem is having too much renewables, too little transmission, need for batteries, is very different from the needs of the Caribbean islands, where there is the need to replace diesel generation with other type of generation that decarbonize the islands and help them get to their goals of net zero. Through other countries like, for instance, Colombia, where despite having enormous renewable energy resources, except for hydro, it hasn't been developed properly. So we work across the region on solutions for tailored to every different country. One couple of examples I wanted to mention here of things that we are doing that are fairly new and exciting is in the Caribbean space. We're working on the first large-scale green hydrogen project in the region, which is being financed, and it's in the island of Barbados. And it's going to be a project that would replace 24/7 diesel generation with combination of solar PV, green hydrogen, and battery storage. Similarly, we are working also in it. IFC typically does, large financings in the energy space. Size is important, but for certain geographies, we can do small things. Let's talk about, again, the islands. In Haiti, we're working on a distributed generation project where we put in a couple of $1 million, but it's pretty transformative for the economy. The next one, please. I just have a few case studies very, very quickly to this, because I think it's a lot to say, but we don't have a lot of time. We're doing a lot with corporates across the region to promote through them the introduction of both new technologies and new instruments in the market, either being green bonds, sustainable linked finance, blue loans, the combination of all of this in one. The sustainability linked loans align the financing with the strategy of the company, and provides also financial benefits, by meeting certain targets related to climate, decarbonization, or social matters. The interest rate is reduced. So we work with the NG in Chile for a green plus sustainability linked loan for energy storage introduction in the country. With Enel Colombia for grid modernization. And the next slide, you'll see with Coelho in Brazil similarly for grid enhancement and modernization. And for Celsius, for the introduction of renewables to Colombia, pretty much is the majority of the renewable energy in Colombia is being financed through some of these instruments by us. So, any question you have, we're happy to respond. We have our contacts here in Latin America. In the next slide, and you get the presentation. So thanks a lot. Happy to respond to any question at the end.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Miguel. You made several important points this afternoon. Foremost, IFC is a leader in advancing energy innovation and new technologies, also through your advisory services and co-development for investment. I also pointed that renewables account for 45% of the portfolio, and this is very important nowadays. And in this context, IFC is the largest issuer of green bonds in the world and develops sustainable finance solutions for its clients. And also climate mitigation investments are essential to challenge climate change. And this is a good point to move to our next and final speaker, Marcela Ponce, who is going to talk to us about climate. So Marcela, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Felipe. I'm gonna wait for Tatiana to put the slides up, but let me start by saying that we are covering a number of topics from the advisory side on climate that include some of the topics that we will cover in the presentation, but they go beyond them. But we only have some minutes today. So first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. If we can go to the next slide, I'm gonna present 4 topics today. One is green buildings, H is the green building certification that the IFC created some years ago, and it's now present in more than 100 countries. And we have around 18 million square meters certified under the H certification around the world. If we can go to the next slide. And we have been working together with financial institutions and developers in hand-holding developers through the process of certifying their projects, understanding what are the benefits of these kind of certifications, both for the developer, for the bank, but also for the end user. So we have been working, I would say, tirelessly in a number of countries to disseminate the benefits of having green buildings and certified green buildings as one of the key eligibility for capital markets, for example, or green bonds. So if we can go to the next slide, just a couple of examples on what we have been doing in different markets. This is Colombia, where we have had, as you can see in that timeline, a number of interventions in the country that include working with the Chamber of Construction, working with the government on some building regulations that include some sustainability factors, working with developers directly and working with financial institutions. And the outcome of all that is that we have a market that is pretty mature now, and that we have not only a number of millions of square meters there, but also a market that is already kind of transitioning into even a more sophisticated status in green buildings like net zero buildings or edge advanced buildings, which means basically 40% more efficient than the traditional building. If we can go to the next slide. Same case with Peru. We have been working on regulations in 10 municipalities in Peru. We have worked with developers and we have provided financing, as we can see, as well as in Colombia, and not only to financial institutions, but also to developers over there and even REITs in Colombia, for example. So this is one good example of how we are making these kind of climate interventions in our countries to mobilize very specific topics, like in this case, green buildings. If we can go to the next slide, please. Blue finance is a priority for us. This is another topic that we have been moving forward internationally. Blue economy is basically the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, to improve livelihoods, jobs, create new jobs, having a healthy ecosystem for the ocean, because the value of global oceans assets is estimated at over $24 trillion. So that means that this is the 7th largest economy in the world in terms of GDP. We can go to the next slide. So the ocean economy is valued at around $2.5 trillion per year, and impacts 3 billion people that lives in very specific areas that are vulnerable, and therefore it is important to work in a number of sectors to protect those oceans and to protect those livelihoods. We are working in manufacturing, we are working in water treatment, transport, fishing, tourism, water management, and chemicals and plastics. In Latin America specifically, we have been working on blue finance through the issuance of blue bonds, like the case of Banco Internacional in Ecuador, but we have also, if we can go to the next slide, please. We have also been working on blue finance as in loans, also in Ecuador, and supporting through advisory services those institutions to create the demand for that funding, for that financing. So working with fisheries, working with aquaculture firms to support them in transitioning to certified practices that are eligible as blue finance. We have worked in the international market by creating the blue finance guidelines that are now adopted by ICMA as part of the green bond issuance eligibility, which gives some sound base also for having firms and financial institutions and any other stakeholder aligned to international standards. There is a big blue economy market now We have been funding, as I was saying, in Latin America, but also in Asia. We already have around $720 million in terms of financing. In Europe and Central Asia, another 200 million. So this is an area where we are working a lot. And of course, as I was saying, we are providing technical assistance as well, so that we support our clients in the process of identifying the assets, creating the demand, designing solutions for blue finance, and so on. If we can go to the next slide, please. Energy efficiency is another very important topic. As we always say, there is no cleaner energy than the one that we don't use. So if we go to the next slide, we are working a lot in terms of identifying where energy efficiency opportunities are. And that means not only financing, as we have been talking about, financing energy efficiency practices, energy efficient equipment, clean production lines, and so on, but also to identify what we can do from the financial sector or a firm level to create those energy efficiency solutions. Sustainable construction is one of them, and now we have recently launched an initiative called the Cooling as a Service initiative, which basically means that we are trying to replicate what has happened in energy districts, but in cooling, expecting from this to have a more efficient use of energy in transport, same with agriculture, the use of different practices and equipment to reduce the energy consumption, manufacturing, and so on. In that sense, if we go to the next slide, we are also working a lot on decarbonization practices. So we are offering advisory to firms that are clients of financial institutions or to financial institutions to create decarbonization plans and roadmaps, both for the internal operational activities, but also for the value proposition for clients. In that net zero roadmap, we are not only talking about energy efficiency, but also renewable energies, as Miguel was explaining already, and emission offset, working on carbon markets as well. We have already identified a number of technologies that we are prioritizing in that energy efficiency roadmap, that we are hoping that will help us scale up rapidly energy efficiency in the region. If we can go to the next slide, please. A link to that is a sustainable supply chain finance. We've had supply chain finance for a long time in IFC, basically looking at leveraging corporate relationships at the bank level to fund suppliers and distributors in the supply chain. But we are now introducing a sustainability angle to that. So how do we ensure that those supply chains are sustainable? Part of that work includes identifying the opportunity, the strategy, and the business model for financial institutions to incorporate a sustainability angle. On the other hand, we have very specific sustainable supply chain finance products. We have recently launched, I think that we are going to see that in the next slide, but we have recently signed a supply chain finance engagement with Citibank and in Mexico, which just today was awarded for the best engagement for the year. And part of the work that we are doing is basically understanding what is the kind of anchor engagement and supplier onboarding that we need. So to make it possible, to have very specific standards and sustainability practices in that chain, as well as working on credit risk frameworks, monitoring, of course, and sustainability performance. That's very important as well for us. And we spent a lot of time from our advisory services to measure the impact of what we are doing. These are the kind of products that we have, risk counterparty in terms of banks, and on the other hand, on corporates. And we believe that that gives a number of options to our clients for global trade finance program on the one side, on the liquidity side, supply chain, as I was saying, but also the warehouse finance program. If we can go to the next slide, please. And this is the example I was talking about, Citi in Mexico. where we have launched the first risk-sharing facility with them to cover a supply chain finance related asset for up to 300 million that recently was awarded with a best engagement of the year. But basically what we do is to provide supply chain finance for those suppliers and buyers within city, and we are incorporating sustainable practices in that so that we ensure that we are also committed to those global objectives that we have around climate. Can we go to the next slide, please? There is a lot of information in the slides, and the slides will be shared with you, but time is very limited, so I'm going very fast, but you can read them in more detail. And finally, we are working on climate smart agriculture. In Latin America, 50% of the emissions, CO2 emissions come from land use, and that is one of the main reasons why we are quite focused on this particular area. Next, please. But basically, climate smart agri means the work that we do with the agricultural sector to reduce GHG emissions on one side, on the mitigation side, to avoid deforestation, to sequester carbon, and that's all on the mitigation side. But also in Latin America, very important, we are working on adaptation and resilience. This is key because in that sense, we have measured what are the vulnerabilities of the financial sector in Latin America when it comes to climate change. And we have found out that agriculture and real estate are the most vulnerable sectors that the financial institutions have exposure to. And therefore, working on adaptation and resilience is very important for the agricultural sector. We are currently working on identifying what are the main practices that we need to put in place in Latin America, starting with Central America specifically, where we see that the productivity has fallen significantly in the last years, which is also in a way creating some migration problems on the one side, but also basically putting the base of the pyramid in a more vulnerable space, let's say. So working on adaptation and resilience means that we are going to work on picking up that productivity for very specific crops that we are kind of approaching now. But of course, with the idea of scaling this up to many other crops. So next, please. So that's what we are doing. And for that, we are working in both the agricultural sector directly through one of our teams that is focused on agriculture. And actually, we are working on exploring opportunities with Netafin at this point in Costa Rica. And on the other hand, we are working with financial institutions to create the capacities. And this is also very important. And I think that along all this conversation, we have highlighted the importance of our investment and financing services. But the technical assistance that we offer has proven to be key to the success of the projects that we do. And that has to do with capacity building, very important, because it is very difficult to change a sector when they don't know how to do it. And that's exactly what we do through advisory services. We work with the farmers to kind of create that capacity in terms of understanding what are the, in this case, resilient practices that they can put in place for very specific crops. We work with the government, with our sister institution, the World Bank, on the regulation side. And we also work with the financial sector so that they can offer not only the financing needed, that it's adequate for the needs of that resilience investment, let's say, but also to also keep creating that capacity in their client base. So we work a lot in understanding what are the opportunities for the financial sector, what are the practices that they can put in place for a return on investment that is easily financeable, what kind of systems we need to touch. So it's not only one crop, but maybe an ecosystem that we need to work on, and so on. So we have run a number of researches in the region for Colombia and Brazil, for example, and we have found huge opportunities in terms of climate smart agriculture. Next, please. I think that's it. I'm going to stay here for any questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Marcela. I think you made also some very important points here, and we can only be impressed by seeing what IFC is doing in greening for the building sector, in blue finance for the ocean economy. Latin America has very, very long shores, and fishing is very important for Latin America, as well as port. Energy efficiency for transport, agriculture, sustainable supply chain finance, and also the smart agriculture, climate change in agriculture. It's impressive to see that there are opportunities in Colombia, for instance, between $3 to $6 billion now for projects in aiming at that. Now, I'm going to pass the floor to Tatiana to see if she has received some questions from the audience.
Yes, Philippe, thank you. Just a few questions I have already answered too. Here is one, especially in terms of politically tense contexts. Overcompliance is a big problem in financing. How does IFC cope with that? And what are possible solutions for financing in such contexts? That comes from Leonardo Sevilla at the Swiss Embassy in Caracas.
Yeah, this is Jan. So let me just take this question. I'm not sure what is meant with overcompliance in this sense. So I don't know whether the speaker cannot, sorry, the person who asked the question cannot speak, right? Can only react by
That's right. The
email.
viewers don't
Because,
have.
you know, we feel that in terms, if it is meant in terms of the social environmental standards, yes, as IFC, we are a leader in that. The standards will be reviewed. We don't have the feeling based on experience that they are over the top. It may be that as compared to some other providers of that our standards are more stringent, but we think the clients benefit from that. I think what Raymond said in the beginning, that he felt he was basically way ahead of when the certain other regulations kicked in, or having worked with IFC. So I'm not sure what is actually meant with the question. Yes, I mean, we are not the easiest party to deal with, let's put it like that. But that means in terms that our due diligence and appraisal is quite rigorous. But having said that, this is exactly what many partners want from us, because it gives them ample comfort to join our financing. So now we are in the process of mobilizing more funds from other parties. And as I just said, this is what people really appreciate from IFC, that we are kind of an honest broker. We dare to be tough if needed. But we also are very reasonable, by the way, so don't get the wrong impression. So yeah, so I just want to say with that. And in terms of politically sensitive, we are not a political institution. It's actually in our articles that the World Bank Group is not. But yes, we are owned by 187 member countries, so certain decisions, of course, are driven by individual interests. I mean, that's how the world works, right? But I also want to make very clear that the decisions taken for our investments, etc., are not politically driven. So I'm not sure whether that answered the question. I see there is a follow-up question perhaps from the person who asked.
Thank you, Jan. I suggest that if Leonardo Sevilla thinks this question has not yet been answered, maybe to elaborate in writing, send us your question once more in more detail, and then we'll take it from there. Otherwise, hopefully it has been answered. Then I have one more from Henry Remond to Miguel Toledo. Please, more details regarding energy project in Peru. Given the advanced hour, I don't know whether this could perhaps be elaborated in writing later after the webinar. Or Miguel, if you have anything right now that you can say in 2 or 3 sentences.
Yeah, no, I mean, Peru is a country where we want to do more. We have some engagements on, again, financing renewables. There's nothing specific I can say now. There's no specific project today. But yeah, I mean, we're trying to do more, and there's some initiatives we're pursuing.
All right, that is all here. Philippe, famous last words before I close the session?
No, thank you very much. I think now we can conclude this very informative webinar. We learned a lot about IFC in energy, in climate, in transformative solutions. And I think what is very positive about this webinar and what we have seen is that there is a lot of potential in Latin America. Through the press, we get a lot of news from all around the world, but I think we also need to have some good news. We also need to have some news to see that things are going on, that there are investment, there is potential, and also that there are people who are really interested in moving forward. And when we see the data, which was presented here by IFC in terms of number of projects, in terms of funding involvement, in terms of also mobilizing funds, then we see that indeed Latin America is on the move. And looking at nearshoring also, it was very impressive to see that also there is potential for Latin America. So I believe that we all will leave this webinar with a view on Latin America, with expectations that indeed there is a lot to be done, and there are people who are working very hard to make it happen. So this is very positive, very constructive, and this gives us momentum for all of us. And finally, I also would like to stress about the excellent quality of the PowerPoints which we have received, and they will be available for on LATCAM's website for all the participants and also for other people who like to view this webinar later on. But it has been a very instructive one, which give us lots of food for thought in terms of moving forward in Latin America on some key issues that we are facing today. Thank you very much, Tatiana. Back to you. Microphone, please. We can't hear you.
Here we go. Excuse me. As you said, Philippe, Latin America is on the move and we have momentum. This is a positive conclusion of this webinar. I would like to thank very warmly our speakers from IFC, Marcela Ponce, Miguel Toledo, Juan Gonzalo Flores, Jan van Bilsen, as well as our speaker from SGE, Christian Michel, for sharing a wealth of interesting and practical information with us and providing valuable insights into the benefits of a collaboration with IFC in a variety of domains, in particular the sectors touching climate and energy. My thanks also goes to our moderator, Dr. Philippe Nel, who structured this session with the usual competence and thoroughness. Dear viewers, I trust that you enjoyed the webinar and profited from the expertise of our panel. You will find today's slide presentations on the LATCAM website, as Philippe mentioned, under the respective event. The webinar recording will be posted shortly on our YouTube channel, LATCAM Switzerland. Should you think of a question later, there will be a Zoom inquiry tomorrow where you can send it. Hopefully, we will see you soon again for our next activities. In the meantime, from LATCAM, all the best, stay safe, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, thank you.